You should be the host here.
We're laughing at you.
We're both Munster people, diehard Munster people, and we want them to do well.
The Red 78 with Alan Quinlan and Niamh Briggs. Nobody knows Munster rugby better.
I'd like to think I know a lot. Hello and welcome along to the Red 78, episode 26 here on the Rugby channel. And with me as always is Niamh Briggs, back from France. The disappointment in France, I would say, Niamh. I hope that's all right to say. How have you been after the weekend? Unfortunately, another disappointing loss. It was going to be a tall order going to France, playing them away. They're a very good side. So what's the mood in the camp like after that defeat?
Yeah, look, I think we're obviously incredibly disappointed. It's not really results driven for us at the moment. It's about performances. And I think, we couldn't get any parity at set piece, put us on the back foot a lot. And we talked about, developing skills. We've also got to develop knowledge around the game and understanding of flow and pressure. And if we're under pressure, we don't need to be playing in our scoring zone. And I think that was two really big things for us. We carried more meters than France. We kicked less. We made more passes. So from a stats point of view, in relation to the phase play, we actually did quite well. We just did it in our own 22 as opposed to in theirs. And then obviously, look, we're struggling set piece wise in terms of trying to find cohesion. I think understanding what Rob and Dave are looking for. Look, it was a tall order. I think for us now going into this weekend, we've got to look at what we can control and what we can fix. And we can definitely fix handling errors. We can definitely fix playing inside our 22 and managing the game better. And I'm sure the two lads will be working with the pack. But a real big learning for us, Connie. I think that was probably the biggest thing.
And how do you fix those issues in such a short space of time, Niamh? Is it a mental thing, or is it just trying to develop their skills more?
Yeah, it's a bit of both, to be honest. You've got to try and figure out what their thinking is. So you got to, sit them down and show them pictures and say, okay, well, what were we thinking here, and why did we do or not do this? And I think that's going to draw out the best learnings for them. You're right. We don't have a huge amount of time. We don't have a huge amount of on-feed time. So you can only do so much in a sport, and that we can't keep overloading information every time they come in. We've got to keep making sure that the message is simple. So a lot of work will be done away from the actual rugby pitch in terms of one-on-ones, in terms of unit work, in terms of video work, and hopefully then that you can transfer that into our couple of pitch sessions before Captain's Run on Saturday.
Will it be hard to pick the girls up? Because we're going to talk in a few minutes about Munster and their loss to Leicester and the big task they have this week. For you guys, mentally, how difficult is it to pick them up? Because you've got there was a lot of optimism and excitement coming into the tournament. You've two losses essentially. Then just to lead on from that, is there more pressure this week to actually get a result against Italy?
See, we as a group kind of understand where we are in terms of our development. Like, it's very difficult to try and I understand you're talking about it's very much a results driven business. But after the game, obviously, girls were incredibly disappointed to.
No, I think there has to be patience here, and everyone acknowledges that from the very start of the tournament.
The big thing, though, Quinny, is that there patience within the group.
Yeah.
In order to keep them, you've got to make sure that they can see the value of what they're doing and the development in terms of certain things. So against Wales, our body height and contact was very poor, and our breakdown was quite slow. Against France, our body height and our ability to clear bodies out of the way was really good. The big thing is that we've got to continuously keep touching on things, because when you don't, it's not that it's forgotten, it's just that it's in the back of their minds. And so it's that continuously just trying to feed them information and confidence. But yeah, look, I think this weekend is a huge game for us. We're not shying away from that, and we're really looking forward to it. Hopefully we get another good crowd at home.
And you fixing the set piece stuff again, that's something that's just work in progress. You can't suddenly invent a load of experienced internationals that can come in and sort that out. You've got to work with these girls and show them those pictures and making them believe it's going to get better. I think that's probably the key for any sports person, isn't it? Believing that things will get better if you keep working hard and working on these deficiencies, if you call them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, the two lads are really, really good. I'm learning loads off them, listening to them. And, to be fair, it's Gans, he lives and breathes line out. It's like another level. And Rob's the same in relation to the scrum. You're right, though. We just can't magically, pick up and have 120 kg girls. It's not how we're built. So we've got to be incredibly proficient at the technique and be technically astute in everything that we do. But it's to have that rugby smarts that if somebody's born in across you, how do we fix that? And unfortunately for us, until you go through those moments, then it's very difficult to learn. You can't really learn them in training. You need to learn them in opposition, and unfortunately they're just learning on an international stage.
Yeah, well, good luck this weekend anyway, and I hope everybody hopes you can get a result. With your preparations and being in France, I don't know if you saw the game live, the Munster Leicester game live.
We put it on. We put it on in the team room, so it was good.
A painful weekend for you. So bar Spurs won on Sunday, so that probably gave you a little glimmer of happiness Sunday evening.
Arsenal losing on Monday gave me even more joy.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, look, we want to, on this platform, we want supporters to get involved, and we want them to give us their opinions. And to tweet, you can tweet us at Rugby Channel after this podcast as well, or our personal Twitters, to leave a comment or leave a comment on YouTube. You have some comments there. I put a tweet out yesterday. I expected Twitter to light up and my own feed to light up with the responses, and I wasn't surprised. There was a lot of messages. Some of them were a little bit nasty, which I can understand as a frustration from the Munster fans after what happened on Saturday night. Munster were beaten 34-19, but they were in complete control in that second half. Of course, Munster put up a good fight in the first half. Probably should have went in at half-time leading, but there was an air of gloom kind of over Thomond Park leaving it on Saturday night. Will you read out some of the responses, because we have a fair few here? We can't read them all out, but
yeah, you gave me the good job. To be fair, this was one that jumped out at me straight away from Declan Gleeson. And look, we're both very aware, before I go into this, about the gulf in class between the two squads, and the strength and depth of Leinster is just outrageous. But tell me another team in Europe who, without 6 starters, would beat that Leinster team. Kilcoyne, Klein, Conway, Zebo, Earls, Haley and Coombs for 40 odd minutes. Take 5 or 6 big day players out of any team and you will struggle. Bar Toulouse, you don't see another team pulling it off. And Patrick Hogan Simmer, he said, no killer. Burns, Zebo, Haley, Conway or Earls only featuring from the bench. We need a full deck to deal with top teams. Ran out of luck on the injury front, always believe. Which was one of the most positive tweets we got. Brian Laller, is it Laller? Yeah, I think it is. Munster Rugby are a top European side. Nothing wrong with them. Crusaders and Leinster are just in a league of their own. Nothing can be done about the Leinster school system. All Munster can do is look to find stability and leadership for 5 years or so. Winky face. Martin Brommel, couldn't match their intensity, strength or speed. We were beaten 5-0 at home in league points. Nothing sobering in that. That's definite. Yet again, no plan to deal with them, but hang on in there and see if we can fluke it at the end. A lot of people were speaking about that in relation to the strategy, and that we didn't really have a crack.
I think I think Munster tried to play in the first half, and on occasions tried to move the ball, but just the accuracy wasn't there. And this is a way different game than playing the Dragons or even the Scarlets match. The pressure you're under, the defensive line speed, the fight at the breakdown. And, one of the tweeters there saying Leinster at a different level. That's blatantly obvious for everybody to see. I think one key ingredient for them is so many players in the Irish team. So they're seamlessly their transition back into their province is probably a more cohesive one than other teams, and plus they're at a level throughout the Six Nations, particularly around their accuracy in the breakdown, their catch pass skills, their timing of passes. And we saw a lot of that on Saturday night. So at times, Munster didn't really have the ability to stop that. I have one here from Sally Maher, who had, it's at Sally Maher 12. She had a fair she sent 3 or 4 tweets. It was a fair rant, but the last one she sent were senior players give Leinster too much respect. They're only laughing at us. There's no bite in these matches from a Munster point of view. So it's
that was a big sentiment, wasn't it, in relation to the lack of bite? And I think it's difficult. You don't really know you don't really know what's bite for them. Do you know what I mean? Like, I thought genuinely for the first 40 minutes, I thought, okay, Munster are in this. I thought there was a couple of big turning points that we'll speak about afterwards. But I just thought, okay, they're at bay. My big thing is that they didn't go after them. They didn't show any creativity, and that's tough. Like, and another big issue for me was on the selection of players. Glenn Flanagan tweeted in, rightly or wrongly, when you have a coach that wants to be judged on the players becoming better men than what trophies they win, that says it all. What was the point in Jenkins over Ahern? Jack rested, no Hodnett. The best centre in World Rugby being used in the line-out. Quicker, he's gone now. And you see, this is like...
I think that's a little bit unfair on Johan.
Yeah,
Johan,
jump on there, Johan.
Of course. And that's the frustration. And listen, they're entitled. The fans are entitled. They're not fools. They're frustrated. They're angry. This has gone on for a long time now, where there's a couple of kind of positive performances, and then when it comes to the big games, and that was the worry for everyone in this really busy period. That, we'll talk about Exeter in a little bit, but that the season will peter out again. And I think it's unfair to say that Johan van Graan is more interested in people becoming better men.
I think that was just
winning matches.
To that interview pre-game. I think that's what that was about.
Yeah, I know.
You know what I mean? He said it. And
he wants to win, and the Munster players want to win this game. One of the kind of things that I've seen in a number of tweets and online is that Munster players are a little bit too nice in this fixture, and they're all pals.
Dave Parks really feel that Munster players that play with Ireland showed their counterparts way too much respect. Leinster crossed the line at the breakdown many times, and Munster never went near it, unfortunately. That's it. That there's been a good few tweets along that theme that Dave has put in. Like,
we'll get more into the tactics in a minute, but I saw James Lowe picking Conor Murray up off the ground at one stage, which I was glad he did. Because James Lowe is incredibly aggressive, and he's shown a bit of close to the line stuff in this fixture over the years, but he did. But I tell you, if I picked a Leinster player up off the ground when I was playing, I'd get lambasted off some of my teammates. But when the little bit of niggle and there was a few scuffles in the second half, there was a lot of, players were stepping up, but like, it's easy to do that when Leinster kind of, what Leinster showed is more aggression at the breakdown and more urgency. And I think it was summed up for me at the start of the game when Shane Daly went up for a high ball, and he went up with Hugo Keenan in the air for a high ball. Shane Daly did nothing wrong, and this isn't a personal thing, but it just kind of summed up the narrative of the game. They went up for a high ball, great to see two players contesting in the air, but you just saw that little bit of extra desire from Keenan to take that ball. Both players kind of had their hands on the ball, and Keenan just took it. Shane Daly is a big man, and I just thought, they're the little battles you need to win if Munster wanted to win this game, because Leinster technically are a better side. I think they've been coached better. They've shown that the depth they have, the quality they have, and like we said last week, Niamh, it's reflected in Irish selection. So
you need a little bit of nasty, don't you?
Not stupid stuff, but you just need that fight and that desire. And I think we lacked a little bit of it.
Last tweet from, and I know this lady's a big Munster fan, from her Twitter handle is Cork Seashell, but she goes by Michelle. And I actually thought it was a really good point. Not having the full squad available hurt us, but we could have had a stronger 23 from those that were there. Use Murray in the way Ireland do off the bench, start Casey. Jack O'Donoghue and Hodnett in the back row. Would like to see Patrick Campbell at 15-2. We can win on Saturday. That's an interesting shout about Patrick Campbell, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think, to be fair, Matt Gallagher hasn't played a lot of games, and he dropped the ball in the second half that was crucial. I think some of the kicking from Leinster was very intelligent. They kicked up the middle of the field, and Matt Gallagher gets the ball and he just puts it up in the air. It's easy pickings for that back three of Leinster. They got the ball, were able to launch a counter-attack again. Kicking the ball out on the full in your own 22 suited Leinster. They were able to get lineouts, launch more attacks. So I just think that, like, Munster only had 5 lineouts in the game. You're a coach, Niamh, and for anyone listening to this, kind of it's a low number, isn't it?
Yeah,
but that's not. It's not by accident.
No, very.
So, well, what does that tell you about Leinster's kicking game? They weren't putting it out in the full. They
didn't want to, because they understand that a lot of Munster's launch comes off line out.
And what are Munster going to do if you kick the ball long to Munster? What are they going to do? They're going to just kick it back. They're not really going to hurt you, and that isn't in their kind of psyche at the moment. It's kind of one dimensional. And Matt Gallagher did that several times. He ran back a couple of feet, and even 20 yards before the defensive line that was coming up, he just kicked it up in the air. Leinster gathered the ball and they attack again. So I thought that was really, really naive. And Stephen Larkham has to take ownership of that, because that's part of your attack and your strategy. And it's just one option, really. There's no kick retreat from there's no retreat from the Munster players. There's no option to go 2 passes wide, run up the edges, put the grubbers up the touchline if you're going to be in trouble. So 5 lineouts they had. They lost 1, they won 4. Leinster had 13 lineouts. So, we talk about stats. That tells its own story. So Munster fell into the trap, which is incredibly frustrating, because, if you're Leinster, you're saying, well, where can Munster hurt us here? They can't hurt us in the backfield. Now, the mitigation to this, Niamh, is Mike Haley is missing, Andrew Conway is missing, and Keith Earls is on the bench. He's just coming back. So the back three from Munster, in fairness, they probably don't have the experience of that kind of pressure. Ross Byrne was pumping the ball up the middle of the field, and Munster lost the kicking game. They lost that ping-pong battle that we see a lot. One of the teams, the best teams at doing this at the moment, and doing it more often than not, is France, what they did in the Six Nations. They just stay patient, they kick long, and they wait for the opposition to put the ball out or kick it up in the air, have a look then to see if it's on. If it's not, they recycle it, and Dupont kicks it long. Leinster did that the other day, very, very intelligently. And that's what frustrates me, that we didn't see that, Munster didn't see that coming in the second half. And it was really, really telling as tactically how they got it right. And if Leinster tactically get it right, then they have game breakers. And if you're continuously defending against Leinster, well, eventually they're going to break you at some stage. And they did so. 3 tries in the second half. It was incredibly convincing, and it was painful for the Munster team. Looking at him in a huddle under the post for some of those tries, it just felt that they had no real answer. So I don't want to buy into this narrative that Leinster are at this level and Munster down here. I think Leinster are at that level, that very high level. They're one of the best teams, if not the best team in Europe. I think very few teams, Niamh, and you know this as a coach as well, could leave an international front row on the bench, be missing James Ryan, Andrew Porter, Kelleher, Sexton, Ryan Baird, and Cope. Whereas Munster, in fairness, and we'll give the mitigation and to the people who were tweeting, and some of them mentioned it. When you're missing Byrne, Coombs went off injured, Kilcoyne, Conway, RG Snyman hasn't been around, Conway.
Big thing for me in that is and only that he wasn't there. That because we never hear anybody talking about him too much was how important John Klein is to us. Because to be fair, I thought Jason Jenkins struggled at the pace.
Struggle is putting it mildly, Niamh. I
Yeah,
think he's
I think the big
6'8",
thing
120 kilos,
yeah,
and I saw two
think,
carries that the ball was taken off him like taking candy off a child, and it's not good enough. And I was really optimistic and hopeful that this guy would go out and say on Saturday night, well, look, I've been injured. I'm very grateful for the opportunity Munster gave me, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to smash some people and I'm going to show some physicality. Now, he didn't go out with the intention of having a bad game, but there's certain things you can control in a game. You can't control the scoreboard, but you can control your aggression. You can control your work rate. You can control your desire. And we didn't see any of that from Jason Jenkins.
I know, but Quinny, that is not the game to put him into. He has been out all season. He played off the bench against Team of South Africa last week.
I do not agree with you in the slightest. I think he should have played, he was never going to play the 80 minutes, playing for 50, 60 minutes. He's a professional athlete, getting well played.
You're looking at the intensity that Leicester play with is like an international. It's an international pace. And for the first half, I was like, okay, Munster are managing, they're coping, they're not really firing a shot, but they're coping. And I just was like, they're going to run out of steam because it's so difficult to live with that intensity. You need players that are in form, hopping off the ground to be able to live with that intensity, irrelevant of how you want to play. Like how you don't select.
So a 6'8", 120 kilo player.
Jack O'Donoghue and John Hodnett.
Okay. Forget about them for a minute.
You're not listening to what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you play players that are on form because they are able to run and run and run. Jason Jenkins, for me, he is so rusty from like a lack of training, lack of games. He looked unfit. He looked sluggish, and you can't live with that intensity, irrelevant of his size, Quinny. If he can't move around the park.
So that's an excuse. That's an excuse that the ball is stripped out of your hands twice.
Oh, I just think that it happened over in South Africa as well. You know that, don't you?
But that you're making an excuse for that someone can just take the ball off you like that because it's intensity.
I'm saying I wouldn't have started him.
Well, he started, and that's it. He started.
I wouldn't have started him.
The two times that the ball is taken off him, it's like, that's not good enough, and he didn't show any sort of desire for me. And fight, and I couldn't fault 95% of them. And I don't want to isolate the guy and have a big debate about this, but I just thought he was really poor, and he played like a fellow who's joining Leinster next year and didn't want to hurt any of the opposition.
Jeez, he played like a fellow who'd been out all season.
Yeah, well, I think that frustrated some people, the way the ball was taken off him a couple of times. Let's move on to the ability for. If you're mentally this week, it's difficult. How do they pick themselves up from this? So what kind of? I'm just trying to envisage like the dressing room afterwards, because I think of, and I do. We've spoken about how good Leinster are, and you got to tip your hat to them and say their systems are brilliant. The school systems, the number of players they have, the squad they have, and that's just reality. We cannot hide away from that fact. And I've had this situation before where people are arguing with me that more Munster players should be on the Irish team. And
it's hard.
No, in the last number of years, I'm saying that there should be more Munster players on, but like these games do them no favors. That's 7 defeats in the league. There's 2 semi-finals and a final in there. Munster won the Rainbow Cup, and let's say we're not surprised that Leinster won the game. I think in the end, I put up the word sobering in the tweet, but there was an air of deflation that this gap is getting bigger.
There is, and there's a huge gulf. And I just look, even stuff like you're looking at, Leinster starter plays off lineouts, like they outrageous. Their movement off the ball, their ability to find passes.
So what do Munster have to do? Can we replicate that going forward? Is that a template? For I think a lot of teams look at Leinster across Europe, but let's focus on Munster and say, can Munster do that? Or is it cut your cloth according to your measure? Do we have the players to do that? Do we have the skill set to do that?
A lot on selection.
Well, it's not just down to selection, I think. Is it down to coaching as well? We're going back
yeah, like I said, certain players will be able to replicate that and others won't. And you've just got to, and you just hit the nail on the head there. For me, you've got to cut your cloth for your measure. I think you've got to find a way that suits you. Like Munster are powerful. I found that this at times during the season when they played with intensity and you're talking about quick ball and how we get quick ball. Not just like for me the other day, the reason why the ball was so slow was in effect, okay, Leinster's back row very good, but like simple things like how the ball carrier falling back in towards the contact. Murray has to go digging, and then everybody's giving out about Murray being slow. No, if you go back and count the seconds in the rucks because of where the ball carrier falls back in towards the ball as opposed to away from it. You know what I mean? Leinster are so good and so detailed at that kind of stuff, and that for me is all very coachable.
Coachable, I think, yeah. You need some personnel that can improve. And look, they're very well coached. So I think it's crucial what happens in the next coaching ticket. All is not lost from Munster. I think obviously we have to cover the reality there and talk about the performance. Leinster scored 4 tries, bonus point, 5 points to 0, win, painful defeat, and an incredibly impressive performance from them. We in fairness, we've acknowledged the mitigation, the injuries. Burns, Coombs going off, Kilcoyne, Conway, Haley, Jean Klein, and I do agree with you. I think John Hodnett should have been involved. I think Jack O'Donoghue should have been involved, whether it's off the bench. That youthful exuberance. Alex Kendellen was outstanding. Super. He's shown that he has the quality, and we do this piece about the Andy. Are you watching Andy Farrell? He's one that I think has no doubt in my mind can make it at international level. It could be as a 7. We don't know, but I think he's definitely going to be needed this week. Just want to ask you about the clean out, Gavin Coombs. Devin Toner's not a dirty player, and I know Devin a long time. I played against him and played with him. He's a top fella, and I don't think there was any nastiness or mitigation or he wasn't trying to injure Gavin Coombs. His reaction was just one of incredible urgency to try and get Gavin Coombs out of potentially poaching the ball. But he comes in from the side, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I thought Gavin Coombs should have got the turnover. Christoph Ridley didn't reward him. He said that there was Munster players blocking, not rolling away. And when you see the pictures clearly afterwards, they made a tackle, but they're not blocking anyone from coming in, clearing out the ball. Devin Toner comes in from the side. And we saw yesterday an announcement that Dan Levy has had to retire, the Leinster player at 27, an incredible player, and it's incredibly unlucky. He picked up an injury in 2019 from a Vian Herbst clear out when they played Ulster. And again, I don't think Vian Herbst had any sort of intention of damaging Dan Levy's knee and putting him through the last 2 years and the frustration and the agony he's gone through and now having to retire. But this is something in the game and it happened continuously on Saturday night from both sides, side clear-outs, and it's not being policed. Is it something that you talk about as coaches, or are you trying to make your players better? And what was your take on that clean-out? And I do want to reiterate the point. Devin Toner had no intention of injuring Gavin Coombs, but his body came in from the side, and the player ends up going off the field and potentially being out for a number of weeks now.
Yeah, I thought it was incredibly unfortunate, and you're right, he isn't from the side, and but it's happening all the time. It's happening because of the ferociousness of the breakdown. I think it's a case of, we speak now about not protecting the ball but clearing out threats, Quinny, in coaching. So you're clearing out any threat that comes towards the breakdown, irrelevant of whether they're going to have any impact in it. And I think sometimes you just get into a position where you're like, red jersey, we've got to go, and unfortunately, look, that was it. And it's incredibly unfortunate for Gavin Coombs. Obviously, I pass on my sincere sorry as well to Dan Levy. You're right, an absolutely incredible player, and 27 is ridiculously early to be finishing. But it's a very similar injury in terms of a very similar kind of picture that we saw from Dan Levy and Gavin Coombs. And when I watched it, I even wince now, and I'm talking about it. it's definitely something that referees are going to have to look at, because to be fair to Devin Toner, it actually happened on both sides of the ball throughout the game yesterday evening, because it's just the ferocity and the intensity of the actual breakdown now of players trying to get in there of the ball carrier, and it's literally like, you're coming one way and you've got to try and clear out bodies. And I just think it's very difficult, but I do think that's something that the referees are going to have to start getting hot on.
Yeah, and it's a shame because he's a big loss for Munster, his physicality and size. We've got to move on, but just before we do, the reality of this loss for Munster is not, obviously, it's very painful when your biggest rivals beat you, but Munster now down into fourth in the URC table on 47 points. So you've got Leinster 1 on 60, Ulster 2 on 50, Glasgow 3 on 50, and Munster fourth on 47, Edinburgh 3 points behind. But the Stormers and the Bulls are up to 43 and 42 respectively with a game in hand. So that situation becomes very, very difficult now for Munster, because they're away to Ulster next, then they're home to Cardiff, and then they've got Leinster in the Aviva. So they're in real danger now of, not real danger, I think they're in danger of possibly not being in the top four and being away in a quarterfinal. I know a lot can happen in the top eight, because the Sharks are in eighth on 41 points, but that table just doesn't look great. And Munster have some difficult fixtures coming up, away to Ulster, they're home to Cardiff, and then the Leinster game.
I think that Ulster game is crucial for the URC.
It's not straightforward here, and they're really, down a number of players. It's looking like it's a really, really, what we said was a difficult run a number of weeks ago is becoming like even more increasingly difficult, and could be, it could be season defining as regards, where they're going to end up if they're going to get into a quarter final. Is it that going to be home or away? But look, the Ulster game is incredibly big. We got to move on to Exeter. In leaving the Munster-Leinster chat, I think we can acknowledge that there's a frustration out there from the fans. There's probably there's a frustration in me. And, the Jason Jenkins thing, it wasn't just Jason Jenkins, but I think sometimes you see things in a game that when it happens a second time, it probably frustrates you more. I think overall, to be fair, I can't fault the Munster players for their efforts. I think they tried incredibly hard. I don't buy into the fact that they didn't want to win this match and that they're playing against their pals. Of course they wanted to win it, but I just think they were beaten by a better side, and it's worrying the gap. I think Munster, to give any sort of hope to any Munster fans listening, I think Munster can and should be better than what we saw. From a rugby intelligence point of view, they made it very, very easy for Leinster in the second half by the naivety of their kicking game. And like I highlighted in the lineouts, Leinster at 60% territory. They just controlled the game, particularly in that second half. Looking ahead to Exeter at the weekend, we have a double header, Champions Cup. So it's a pretty daunting task, given that they've got to pick themselves up here mentally, a little bit like your team. You've got to pick yourself up, and there's always an intrigue in that. How do you get a reaction, and not just a kind of a mental reaction, but how do you fix issues and problems that you have and make them better? A week can be a long time or a short time in sport, but they've got to hit the ground running this week and make sure that mentally they can get some positivity and that they can get a reaction. How do they do that, Niamh? They're going over to play Exeter, and just a couple of points on Exeter, they're fourth in the Premiership, the Gallagher Premiership. They played 21, won 12 and lost 9. Not as consistent as we've usually seen from Exeter in the last 4 or 5 years. Like, they won this trophy 2 years ago. They've won the Premiership for a number of years. They're right at the top with themselves and Saracens. When Saracens were in it, Saracens are second now, but not as consistent in their performance, not as dominant. In Europe, in the 4 pool games, they won 2 and lost 2. So they beat Montpellier at home 42-6 in the first one. They lost in Glasgow 27-6. And when I looked at that result, I went, oh, well, maybe they're not that good. And that there is a few chinks in their armour. And then I see the result the week after, Exeter 52, Glasgow 17 at home. So they turned that around in that back-to-back game. and then they were beaten in Montpellier. So they finished sixth in Pool A, 1-2, lost 2. So maybe they're not as strong as they have been, but Exeter away is a very, very difficult fixture.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's twofold here. So the first thing is that it's not Leinster. I think Munster is bogey team at the moment in terms of psychologically being able to get after teams as Leinster. They just don't seem to do that. And secondly, it's Champions Cup, and Munster always show up for Europe. And I think that's really important for us to kind of keep reiterating. Exeter have their own injury worries. They're definitely not as consistent as they have been over the last few years. They seem to kind of hit a little snag, a bit like Bristol Bears as well over in the Premiership, where they're just kind of going through a rut, and it's their lack of consistency. They're missing big players. They're missing the likes of Luke Cowan-Dickey, Jack Noel, these guys that are incredibly influential to the way they play. Now, selection is going to be huge for Munster this weekend in terms of the player pool. We look at if you kick Purdy, you're kicking to one of the best counter attackers in the world, and Stuart Hogg. The set piece is going to be huge because lots of teams have mirrored their power plays, so the ones in and around the scoring zone off Exeter, because if they get in within 10 metres of your try line, they score 9 times out of 10. They're incredibly efficient. The speed of which they get around the corner, their ability to square up into the contact in such tight spaces, and then you're pulling it out to the likes of Joe Simmons, and they're actually a really good side to watch. But you're looking for a reaction from Munster, and that's the big thing. You get a reaction, then I think that we get a good result over there, but it's going to be very hard.
Selection-wise, there's a bit of talk this week about when Joey Carbery moved to full back and Ben Healy went out half. Do you do that on Saturday?
I am 100% a huge advocate. I've been saying it for a very long time that Joey Carbery's best position is 15, and it's not that he's not a good 10. It's just that I find that he's way more influential in the game when he's playing a 15, and he has so much space. He can see everything. Munster have lacked the second playmaker a lot when the way they play, if they only play one or the other. So I would love to see, especially if Haley is still out. I think that's huge because I think Haley's had a really, really good season. If Haley's still out, then I would love to see that and put Crowley onto the bench. Then you're including all three that can, are game changers. But look, we'll have to wait and see. I do think that the injury problems for Munster are going to continue over the next few weeks. I think they were saying yesterday that the likes of Byrne, Kilcoyne, Conway, these guys are out for another few weeks, which is really not good timing for Munster.
Ty Byrne is really an incredible loss, isn't he? Given where the levels of performance that we've seen of him in the last 12 months on the lines with Ireland, November, and the Six Nations, and with Munster in some of the games, he's just, the turnovers he gets is crucial. There's as is Kilcoyne and Conway and Coombs. I think hopefully John Klein is back. Mike Haley, there's talk he may be back. So look, we're talking, can they pick themselves up? It kind of has a feeling this is kind of like the Wasps week, where their backs are to the wall big time here, and we saw a great reaction with a mixture of AIL players and senior internationals. I heard Peter O'Mahony talking about it in the press yesterday. It has a feeling that they need to find something special this weekend. And at worst, if they lose the game, this is like these two fixtures are kind of unique with regard, being knockout rugby. They've got to make sure that whatever happens here, if they don't win this game, that it's only half time, and that they bring them back to Thomond Park, and that Exeter don't run up a score on them here. Because I think if I watched Exeter Bath last weekend, and at one stage Bath were 22-7 up after 32 minutes. They had 3 tries scored. They're keeping the ball alive, playing with great kind of ambition, and for a side who've been struggling this season, they've turned it around a little bit. And then, Exeter just they have a ruthless edge to them, Niamh, and they turned it around, and they go in at half time, a point down. They get 2 tries themselves, and they changed the whole picture. And then they just kicked on from 60 minutes onwards. The last 20 minutes, they kicked on and won the game comfortably. So can Munster do that mentally this week? Can they find a performance And just to wrap on this, will they win the game, or is it a case to just make sure the scores are close if they lose it?
No, I think they can win it. I really do. I think that, I'm just going to wrap there now and just say, I think they can win it.
They're going to win it. Okay.
Happy
right.
birthday.
Okay. Well, look, fingers crossed. You just think of some of the players who've been there a long, long time, and it's been a bit of too many of these big disappointments. And unfortunately, the Leinster one, you tend to remember that one throughout the season. They've still done a lot of good stuff, but they need to be really, really much better this week and get their accuracy. And like I said about the rugby intelligence, just play the ping pong and just do the simple things really well. And I think that's what let them down last week. And that was probably the most disappointing thing. And I think just to finish on it, there's very few teams throughout Europe could miss 6 or 7 players and cope with that Leinster team. So most teams need to be either have a full deck of players when you're playing Leinster, or else, get that little bit of bounce of ball and bit of luck, and neither happened from it the weekend. But I think they need to be better and can be better. Before we wrap, we'll try and see, is there any little bit of news and gossip? We're still waiting on the head coach. 4 months now, Niamh.
Yeah.
I said last week that I heard it was getting very, very close. I believe it is done. And I believe it's in the position now of an announcement is imminent. We need to get that pretty soon. I think Peter O'Mahony was asked about that. And it has created a little bit of uncertainty, I think, for everybody. So it needs to be... I
think it's just the constant chat about it. Every press conference, every rugby pod, every rugby news article, everybody's talking about it. So it's not doing anybody any favours, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, it's gone on too long. I think it needs to come out now. It's like we're into April already. It needs to just be done, and not just the head coach. The assistant coaches need to be sorted out. John Ryan is going to Wasps. He's been a great servant for Munster. He's moving on at the end of the season.
Yeah.
So we'd like to wish him luck, and hopefully he can. He was there when I was playing. At the end of my career, John was there, and I think he hit big highs, and then probably didn't have that consistency. Played with Ireland, but he's been a great servant for Munster, and I think he's a good acquisition for Wasps. I know that for Munster, the goal is to try and get Kenyon Knox up a level, Roman Salanoa, but there's still concerns there about that front row quality and that level of playing that those guys can get to, and it's still a little bit of an uncertainty there. So, well, good luck to you at the weekend, Niamh. That's it from episode 26 of the Red 78. To make sure you get your podcast straight to your phone every week, just search the Red 78 wherever you get your podcasts and press subscribe. And don't forget to get in touch with your tweets. You can tweet us personally or tweet us at the Rugby channel, or leave a comment on YouTube. We'll try and pick them up as well. So fingers crossed it's going to be a better weekend for us this weekend, Niamh.
Hopefully.
My Liverpool play City on Sunday, so that's a league decider. I don't know who Spurs are playing. I don't really care who Spurs are playing against, to be honest. I just hope Liverpool can beat City, a very tall order as well. Obviously, hope Munster can beat Exeter, and that you get a win against Italy as well. So good luck, and we'll see you next week.
The Munster Rugby Podcast, Red 78 with Alan Quinlan and Niamh Briggs. Nobody knows Munster Rugby better.